Welcome to the Accumulating Wealth Podcast. I'm Judson Crawford.
And I'm Hunter Satterfield. We are CPAs, wealth advisors, and partners at CWA, a financial services firm here to help business owners navigate the decisions they face every day.
And since the big, beautiful bill passed in July, we've received lots of questions from clients and friends about the changes it made to 529 plans.
And with a child in college myself and two more on the way, I knew it was time to do an episode on it. Let's go. Okay, listeners, we are going to do a little back to the basics on college, which will be great. We referenced 529s in our introduction. There were some changes, as noted, with the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. So we'll talk about those. But Judson, I think, you and I have started to deal, obviously, not just with personal situations with kiddos and savings and whatnot, but probably more and more of our clients have now had kids that are in college. And so we've just dealt with sort of all these nuances, which we'll reference a few of those today. We're not going to cover everything necessarily on some of these examples, but some of these nuances of things that we've seen that have popped up, and it should be good to go back to kind of the basics on these plans and what makes them effective. I mean, maybe the best place to start is like, if we're saving for college, why 529s? Like, why wouldn't we do another vehicle?
Well, I mean, the simple answer is that the 529 is hands down the easiest and best place to save in advance for your children's education. There's really not even a question. A 529 plan is almost like a Roth IRA for education, right? Because you put in after-tax contributions for your children. They grow tax-free. And then if you use all of that, both contributions and growth on educational expenses, it comes out with no taxes on all of the earnings you've had over the years. And then the kicker is that if you're in a state that has a state tax, you oftentimes get a tax benefit for contributing to these as well.
That's right. And a lot of the same rules as a result of what you had said, these things are invested in the markets. And as a result of that, the whole concept of 1-to-1, 2-to-1, 3-to-1 applies here too, right? I mean, we were just referencing before we went on, you want to share a little bit about just the numbers you're seeing on your oldest daughter Eden's account. I mean, it's the same thing we've already talked about with how our other savings grows.
Yeah, I remember when Eden was born and I was waiting for her Social Security card to come. And I knew the day that I got that Social Security card that I was setting up the 529 plan, because if I didn't, I was going to feel like the biggest hypocrite in the world after 10 years of telling clients to do this exact thing. So, yeah, one of the things that, we can talk about this after what I see with Eden, but, these are set up at the state level. Texas doesn't have a state income tax. And so I went with a plan that had what I thought were good investment alternatives and low fees. And I set that up, and it's basically been on an automatic withdrawal of $500 a month since she was born. Anyways, was having a conversation just last week with a client about 529 plan versus other options. And I thought I hadn't looked at Eden's in a while. And I logged on, and she is 10 years old, and the account now is about 45% earnings or growth and about 55% contributions that we've made. So basically, we're almost to the point where, she's at a break even, meaning, what has been contributed to her, it's doubled.
Yeah. I mean, and we're seeing that with Ronnie, obviously now in college. The amount that was in his account versus what we saved is just staggering, right? And you even started earlier for Eden because I didn't have a good financial planner before I came to Kane Waters.
That's right.
And he was already.
And you didn't have one until you started planning for yourself. So.
Exactly. So all that to be said, folks, we're going to go a little bit through some of the rules here. What are the expanded rules under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act? What doesn't qualify? I think that's a common question we get. How much to save? Like just broadly, if you've got a kiddo that's born. So we'll do that. And then what happens if we have leftover funds? I mean, maybe it'd be fun to start with some simple stats first. So only 10% of parents leverage 529 plans for education expenses. Which is pretty crazy. And among millennials, only 8%, Gen Z, only 6%. So this is definitely an area that is not tapped. So certainly one that we want to talk about. About 69% of parents stash money for children's education related expenses in traditional checking or savings instead, which is the opposite of what you want to do. 529s are absolutely the way to go. And so diving in a little bit, Judson, you talked about, hey, look, these are set up by the states. If you are in a state with a state income tax, start with that plan. Look at that one first. If not, there are some great websites which we can reference here in a second to go out and just find some really good investment related plans. Like Vanguard has some states that they sponsor, TIA, Craft, things like that.
Yeah, and even if you're in a state, if you are in a state with a state income tax, there are oftentimes multiple plans for you to sort through. And so a lot of times, what we're looking at here is, well, I'm about to start talking about the investments within the plan. Is that okay?
That's great. Knock
Okay.
yourself out.
The easiest thing to do in a 529 plan is to go to an age-based allocation, right? You can go get an aggressive age-based allocation, and because it is sort of set it and forget it. You do not have to think about as your child grows into their later teens. You don't have to think about going and allocating it yourself to get more conservative so that they're not 18 years old and graduating and the market sells off and you've lost 10 or 15%. And then the second thing is that, while we're doing these broad index type of investing for them, there's no reason to pay a lot of fees. So typically, for clients that aren't getting a tax benefit, I will recommend funds that, again, have a good age-based allocation option and ones that have low fee investments.
Yeah, the key, I think, on the investment front, agreed there, is to just get a broad index here because, so much of what the index, what's happening in the index is largely being tied to sort of cost of living increases, which is where college tuition comes from, right? So they kind of go hand in hand together. So, all right, so let's start with the original sort of the OG coverage rules here. They were originally established just for post-secondary education, so college and vocational. So what are we talking about there, folks? The original plans were for tuition and fees, books, supplies, equipment, room and board, on or off campus, but it's based on basically the published school on campus housing. And of note, the rule there is they have to be at least half time in school to be able to pull for that. Computer software, internet, and then adaptive equipment if needed for various special needs or disabilities. So, what I think is interesting, like now that we're actually seeing this on a day-to-day basis. So like Ronnie, for instance, is sort of on the pre-med track at Arkansas, and, he has a lab on Tuesday nights. So it's like, hey, I need all these things for lab. So that can come out of the 529, right? So there's all these sort of, special nuanced things. Before he went to college, we went and bought him a new laptop, right? And so that we could do that. An iPad, because a lot of their classes now, Judson, don't have books, like when you and I were there. So that works as well. So that was sort of the original, sort of coverage that was there. As is typical with the government, Judson, over time, they get less restrictive on these plans, like we're seeing now with Roths, right?
Yep.
So they get less restrictive. So a few years ago in 2017, they opened it up to K through 12 education expenses. So given you have one that is squarely in that, you want to talk about the original rules, and then I'll talk about the expansion. So what is it that could get covered under K through 12? And are there any state rules that are exempt from that?
Yeah, so the federal law that was passed in 2017 allowed for someone that has a 529 plan to use up to $10,000 a year on K through 12 expenses from their 529 plan, and again with no tax consequences of taking out those gains. What's interesting is that this was a federal rule, but it wasn't adopted by all states. There's a smattering of states across the country. I think it's somewhere between 5 and 10 that do not allow that in their 529 plan. So they did not adopt the federal law. So if you want to start doing that, please look at your state's 529 plan to make sure that it is allowed. I would hope that with this expansion that some of the states that weren't allowing it would do that. It's kind of selfish to me.
It is. How dare they? I mean, you use such a great word, smattering, which kind of sent me in a different direction. And then I was like, oh, I should look while he's talking about this on Grok. So I did. It looks like California is a stated one that doesn't allow it. Shocker there. And then Grok says other potential ones are Colorado, Hawaii, Illinois, Kansas, Kentucky, Maine, Minnesota, North Carolina, and Vermont. Those are all very selfish states.
Yes.
But again, I think the best thing to do there is not take AI for it, but more so just go out and say, hey, and we know some of those are the case because we've actually dealt with that on clients now to where you can't pull those through K through 12. Now, Layering on, I have some kiddos obviously in high school right now. You can use that also for standardized testing fees, dual enrollment fees, tutoring, online coursework, and then same thing if you need any sort of educational therapy for special needs or things like that. So you can use that as well. So the little hook, as we said, is under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. That was actually expanded to $20,000 per year. So it's gone from 10 to 20. Again, the same things sort of still qualify there. All right. Before we get to what doesn't qualify, let's expand a little bit on what else the One Big Beautiful Bill Act brought in. So the biggest thing, and some of these things are going to start in 25, folks, and some are going to start in 26. The biggest thing that it brought in was tax-free use, similarly, for non-degree programs focused on, I'm going to quote this, career skills is the kind of quoted number. So basically the whole concept here is like, hey, if it's a recognized non-degree program it has to be authorized under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act or be state or federally approved. You basically can pay for tuition. You can do book supplies and equipment, testing fees, continuing education fees. But look, this is basically, Judson, the concept here is that the government recognizes that maybe traditional college is not going to be for everybody going forward. We need skilled labor, right? We just need skilled laborers. And so if you're going and achieving some sort of skilled labor or, some sort of, testing that you need to have in order to go into do a different career, that is now also eligible in 25 or 26, depending upon what type of career it is.
Yeah. And I think that, again, not to divert too much, but the statistics show that many of the trades are making more money than many of the college graduates. And so, it's a fantastic option, but this would include, many of the trades that you're probably thinking about in your head, but could also be applied to culinary school, art school, a lot of different things that are not a 4-year traditional university.
Yeah, I have somebody actually that works here now that is like super into cooking. And I can confirm, is phenomenal at it, as she's brought us treats. And that's exactly right. You can use it for all that type of thing. I mean, at the end of the day, I love the government's approach here. Anything that's going to create GDP growth, we should be able to use it for. Like if you're going and getting some sort of secondary skill that provides value to the economy, they should be able to pull from these plans. So, okay, let's real quick. We'll rip through before we get to how much do you save. Let's just rip through what doesn't qualify. So if something doesn't qualify, Judson, and you pull it out, what's the penalty? Let's start there.
So it's a 10% penalty for pulling out it's a 10% penalty and then taxes on any of the gains that are pulled out, essentially.
Yeah, and that's exempt if you've got death, disability, or scholarship. But otherwise, if you do one of these things, you are getting that penalty and taxes. So transportation or travel costs, so no paying for PJ Life for your kid to get to and from school, or Uber for them to get around campus. We can set aside. I have a funny story on that. No health insurance or medical expenses. Ronnie actually just got really sick and had to go to the doctor on campus. Can't do that. You got to pay for it through your health insurance plan. No sports, games, or club fees. So I think president of KA sitting across from me here. Yeah, you can't do that, right? So no fraternity fees or anything like that. Cell phone plans are out. And then, again, room and board if the student is less than halftime. You want to hear my Uber story?
Yeah, I do.
It's pretty funny. So good friends of ours, daughter went to Arkansas maybe 5 years ago. They were like, look, we really understand that there's going to be some decisions that you make and, maybe you're not in a place that you can get home. And so we want to just give you the opportunity. We're never going to ask if you need to grab an Uber at 2 a.m. It is your choice. Go ahead. We aren't going to ask. Here's our Uber account. Have at it. 3 months into her fall freshman semester, Uber's getting hit right and left at 10 o'clock in the day, whatever else it is. Well, the Arkansas campus, for those that don't know, is incredibly hilly. I think Ronnie's dropped like 10 pounds since he got there because of all the walking up and down hills. She was Ubering to class.
I mean, put it out there.
Why wouldn't you? Yeah. So, okay. So those are all the rules. 529s rock. You should use them. Judson, how much do we need to save? And we know this, right? Because we do this for clients. We build it into our financial plans from the get-go. When Eden was born and got that Social Security number, like what are we even aiming for broadly for savings?
Yeah, so I think that, generally, if you're saving for a public education, which, again, A public education now, if we're aiming for both room and board, is probably somewhere around, let's say, $30,000 a year. Um, you need to start saving $500 a month ASAP, right after they're born. And if it's a private school, which now can be anywhere from 50 to 75, probably, that is more than doubled. You probably need to be looking at about $1,200 a month.
Yeah, and we did some college tours with my middle son, and he was interested in one private school. We went there, and granted, they're all in per year is 85,000, which is just staggering because the public schools, to your point, are like 25 to 30. Now they did say, hey, 65 is probably a more realistic number, and so the $1,200 a month we reference there, folks, is if it's full cost. But I think this comes down to, Judson, sort of some of the nuance here when we're talking to clients is like, what are you trying to achieve? Are you saying, hey, child, son or daughter, we're going to give you in-state public school? Well, then it's the 500. Or, hey, we want to give this child every opportunity. And if we start at the 1,200 and they get scholarships to private school or they get, something else, we probably can use that for graduate school, right? And then you'd be at the 1,200. But I think somewhere in between those, and maybe at first it's the 500 and then you ramp over time.
Well, and what I was about to say is that if you're at a place where, you're having children and you can't do $500 a month, do something. $100 a month. Get that money saved. It's the same philosophies that we talked about just recently, the compounding of interest, 1-to-1, 2-to-1, 3-to-1. Just start it. You can always get on any given month. You can get on and adjust that and go from 100 to 100 to 150 and then start increasing that. The sooner you get it done, the happier you'll be, I promise.
I have a question for my financial planner.
Yes.
Can I ask you one?
Yes.
I had a client come in a few years ago and they were not saving for their own retirement, but it was super important for them to save for their two kids' college. And so they were hitting their 529 on a monthly basis and sacrificing their own retirement goals. Now, the argument was, hey, they both compound, so it's all good. What would you tell that client that might be listening now?
I think that again, I don't know how much they were saving. Let's say they were saving the $500 a month. I think I'd go back to what I originally said and say, look, number one, there are ways, whatever percentage it is out there, 75% of students, whatever it is, get out of college with some sort of loan, right? It is not a good idea, in my opinion, for you to solely fund your kids' education and put your retirement to the side. You will regret that decision one day. Even if that's something that you have to help your kids out later by, you can help pay your kids' student loans off, but there are options out there for them to fund that on their own. Nobody said that, also nobody said that you have to fund, that you have to fund a private school for kids. That's a choice. If you have the ability to save for a private school, fantastic. If you don't have that ability, maybe, that should be something that your kids should bear themselves. So bottom line is that in my opinion, that client would need to divvy that up and do less to their kids' education and save some for themselves.
Yeah, I basically told them the same thing. I said, you can save for, or you can get loans for college, but you can't for your retirement. So let's focus on that first. But I kept some amount going into the college just to be that habit that they needed. Right. And I think, again, what we're trying when we look at a financial plan, we're trying to create this sort of sustainable, thing that brings you contentment and joy in life. And so if it's like, okay, we're contributing a little bit to our kid, but we're primarily focusing on ourselves, I think that's big step one. So
and there's a part of that it's not selfish. Because do you want your college educated kid that you've paid their whole education for to then pay for you later in life? No, you don't. But going back, if I could originally restart the answer to your question, what I would say is, can I see a picture of little Johnny? And then when they show me, I'd say, are you sure he's college material?
Okay. So moving on, if you're looking for a new planner here at Kane Waters, we have a wonderful list starting with Judson, just with tremendous advice like that. I would have said the same thing. Okay, so last but not least, Judson. So we've talked about the basics of them, why they're amazing. We will still, folks, kind of give you some resources here in just a second. We talked about how much to save. Now let's talk about leftover money, because that's a huge question we're getting now from clients that their kiddos are done and they're like, man, I have funds left over. All right, so First things first, grad school, right? I mean, you can still use it for grad school. They can keep that money in there. Now they have the opportunity to develop additional trades, like we talked about. But maybe the first place to start is the opportunity now, which was developed a few years ago, for them to transfer that into a Roth IRA. So you want to talk a little bit about that? We've talked about that on the podcast, but since this is very topical, you want to talk about how that looks?
Yeah, it's huge. It's the ability. So the account has to be in place for 18 years. So you can't set up a 529, put 35 into it, and then all of a sudden transfer it out. But if the account's been open for 18 years, and it doesn't matter whether your kid used all of it for education. I mean, you could save it just for this, but over a 5-year period, you can transfer $7,000 a year, which would be basically their Roth IRA contribution per year from the 529 into a Roth IRA. So a total of $35,000. Now, if you listen to our next episode, that $35,000 is actually going to be increasing because the IRA limits are increasing. So we would expect that each time the IRS increases the limit on the Roth IRA, that's going to be a little bit more that you can do per year into a Roth IRA for your kids. Huge, right? Because if you think about it, and in reality, if that's been open for 18 years, you've gotten 18 years of tax-free growth. You then transfer it into a Roth IRA for your children, which is basically all growth when they're 25, and then that has another 30 years to grow tax-free.
Absolutely. And I think it's a little bit of a reward. I mean, this is how it is for Ronnie, right? Like, hey, we've got this money set aside. You chose to go to a public school. Depending upon what medical school looks like, if you've got money left over, this is a reward for you that you can now transfer in. So I just for making good choices and getting good grades and doing the thing. So the second one, folks, is what was already referenced, is student loan repayments. So there is a rule, and this is unchanged by the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. It is up to a lifetime limit of $10,000 per beneficiary for principal or interest on qualified education loans. So that's a really good way to accomplish it as well. And I think both of those do have some like rules you have to follow, both the Roth IRA and that. So you would want to talk to your Kane Waters planner on those. The last one, Judson, is probably the easiest, which is transfer to a relative. You want to talk about that?
Well, yeah, and we do this. We do this quite a bit with siblings, right? Because if I have clients with 3 or 4 kids, and we funded, let's say $500, per month to the kids' IRAs for all these years, and they all have $150,000, and then one gets a scholarship to an in-state school, and so they're basically just paying tuition, and one goes to Vanderbilt, and one's planning on going to medical school. They all have different needs, and so you can transfer these things between beneficiaries because parents, you are the owners of these accounts. You will put a beneficiary as your child and save for that child, but it is still your money. So you have the ability to transfer it between accounts for your kids. If all of your kids use those up and you've done the Roth IRAs and they don't have student loans, then you can consider, switching that to, again, a niece or a nephew. It doesn't even have to be somebody related to you. It could be a friend or whatever. Or, I mean, theoretically, you could have it grow until your grandchild is potentially alive and ready to go to school.
I think that's one of the coolest things, right? Like if you're left over with some funds and they do the 5 years of Roth IRA contributions and there's still money left over, imagine compounding for another 25 years for your grandkids. I mean, your kid would get a huge start on their Roth IRA plus their own kids' savings, own kids' college savings as well. So
you can have this if you name him Judson.
That's right. If you can't do one of those 3 or you choose not to, you can always do the 10% penalty and pay the taxes on the gains. Okay. Last but not least, folks, before we wrap this up, we do get questions on like, how do you actually take money out of this? So this gets kind of complicated. These are self-audited plans, so you don't have to race off and send somebody to the IRS every single time. But you can get your 529. So like when you have an expense. So for instance, this fall with Ronnie, when we got the first bill from University of Arkansas, you can have your 529 log in and have them send a check directly to the university to pay. And that works great. And you avoid the 1099-Q filing and all the little, hangups that come with that. At the same time, you're not always going to have that, right? So when we paid for his lab equipment or whatever else, if we use the 529 for that, you basically keep those receipts. You can actually upload them a lot of times to the 529 website. It's optional, but it's not required. But it's your proof that you basically match those expenses out. So Again, there's a kind of an informal process when you actually pull these funds out, and a lot of times your 529 website can give you direction on that.
Yeah, and I think the big thing here is that, like, you know, I have a lot of clients that reimburse, let's say, tuition and room and board, and they don't worry about all the other little stuff. Keep track of it anyways, because you never know what could happen if a child gets a scholarship later on or whatever it is. Keep track of all qualified expenses that you are paying on behalf of your children, so that if something comes up, you have all of those handy.
Final thing before we close out is resources. So obviously your Kane Waters planner, if you're a Kane Waters client, we have tremendous resources inside of eMoney, which is our financial planning software, to run all types of colleges and tag expenses to it and things like that. So that's a tremendous resource. For those that don't have a Kane Waters planner, you know, my personal favorite website is savingforcollege.com. So on there, they've got little drop downs at the top. You can get their plan rankings. You can get the performance rankings. So they go in and rate the investment performance of each of them. It's got stuff on fees as well, which is great. And then there's a whole section on choosing a plan. And you can go look at your state, compare states, look at the investment options. And then, of course, you can enroll through there. You don't have to. Obviously, they get a kickback if you do. And so a lot of times my clients will do all their research there, and then they'll go directly to the state website and roll through there. So tons of resources out there. As always, if you've got questions, hit us up, and we are happy to address those.
Well, the best way to keep up with this is to hit subscribe, so you'll never have to miss an episode. And you can always go back and catch up on the ones you've missed. If you're enjoying the show, leave us a review. We really do want to hear what you have to say. If you have a question, comment, or even an idea for a future episode, reach out to kanewaters.com/wealth. We read them, and yes, we actually reply. And if you want to learn more about what we do when we're not behind the mic, visit kanewaters.com. We're helping more than 3,400 clients across this country work towards their long-term financial goals. Thanks for listening to the Accumulating Wealth Podcast. We'll see you next time.